I woke up to find my husband staring at me. "Who are you?" he asked. He swears I'm not his wife. He says his wife has a scar I don't have. Thanks for choosing to watch my video. Feel free to leave a comment on the story and subscribe to the channel. Enjoy the story to the end. I woke up at 3 in the morning because I felt someone watching me. That prickly awareness that creeps up your spine when you're being observed. And when I opened my eyes, my husband Marcus was sitting up in bed, staring at me with an expression I'd never seen on his face in our 9 years of marriage. Not confusion exactly, more like he was looking at a stranger who'd broken into our bedroom and decided to sleep in his wife's spot, which would be me, except apparently it wasn't me according to the look on his face. "Baby, what's wrong?" I asked, my voice still rough with sleep, reaching for the lamp on my nightstand because his expression was starting to scare me in a way that made my heart do uncomfortable things in my chest. The light clicked on, throwing shadows across our bedroom in Phoenix, Arizona, the room we'd painted last summer in that gray color I'd wanted, and he'd said looked like a prison but had agreed to anyway because he loved me. Marcus flinched when the light hit his eyes, but he didn't stop staring at me like I was a puzzle he couldn't solve. "Who are you?" His voice came out flat, no emotion, just those 3 words that made absolutely no sense at 4 in the morning or any other time. I laughed because what else do you do when your husband of nearly a decade asks you that question, but the laugh died in my throat when I saw he wasn't joking, wasn't playing some weird game, wasn't doing that thing where he pretends to forget stuff to make me laugh. "Marcus, it's me, it's Rochelle, your wife. The woman you married in 2016 at that venue in Scottsdale where it rained even though it never rains in Arizona in June." He shook his head slowly, his hands gripping the comforter like he needed something to hold on to. "No, you're not Rochelle. You look like her, but you're not her. Where is she?" "Baby, I am literally right here. I'm Rochelle. We went to bed together 6 hours ago, after watching that documentary about fraud you kept saying was boring." I sat up fully now, my nursing scrubs from yesterday still draped over the chair where I'd thrown them after my shift at the hospital, proof that this was our bedroom, our life, our reality. "Rochelle has a scar," he said, and his voice had taken on this stubborn quality like a child insisting the sky is green. "She has a scar right here." He pointed to his own left shoulder, tracing a line from his collarbone down about 3 inches. "From when she fell off her bike when she was 8 years old, and you don't have that scar." I looked down at my shoulder, pulled the strap of my tank top aside to show him smooth brown skin with no scars anywhere near where he was pointing. "Marcus, I never fell off a bike when I was 8. I didn't even learn to ride a bike until I was 12 because I was scared of falling, and I definitely don't have a scar there." "Then you're not my wife," he said simply, and I watched him scoot backward on the bed like I might attack him, press himself against the headboard with his eyes wide and his breathing getting faster. "Where's Rochelle? What did you do with her?" This was when fear started replacing my confusion. The kind of fear that comes from realizing something is deeply wrong and you don't have the first clue how to fix it. Marcus was a software engineer, the most logical person I'd ever met, the kind of man who made spreadsheets for our grocery shopping and never forgot an anniversary or a birthday or where he'd left his keys. This wasn't him forgetting something. This was him looking at me like I was a completely different person, wearing his wife's face. "Okay, baby, I need you to stay calm, and I need you to listen to me. I'm going to call my supervisor at the hospital and tell her I can't come in today. And then we're going to go to urgent care because something is wrong, something is very wrong with how you're perceiving things right now." He pressed himself harder against the headboard. "I'm not going anywhere with you. I don't know you. You could be anybody. You could be dangerous. Marcus, look around this room. Look at the photos on the dresser. That's us at the Grand Canyon last year. That's us at your brother's wedding. That's us on our honeymoon in Jamaica, where you got that sunburn so bad you couldn't wear a shirt for 3 days." I pointed to each frame, my voice rising despite my attempt to stay calm. He looked at the photos, really looked at them, and his face did something complicated, cycling through expressions like he was trying to reconcile what he was seeing with what he believed. "Those are pictures of Rochelle, but you're not her, you just look like her. I don't understand how you look exactly like her, but you're not her." I grabbed my phone off the nightstand and called Marcus's brother Darrell, who lived 20 minutes away and was probably going to be furious about being woken up at 3 in the morning. But this qualified as an emergency. He picked up on the fifth ring, his voice thick with sleep. Rochelle, what's wrong? Somebody die? Daryl, I need you to come over, right now. Marcus is having some kind of episode. He doesn't recognize me. He thinks I'm an imposter or something. I heard rustling on his end, the sound of him sitting up. What do you mean he doesn't recognize you? I mean he's looking at me like I'm a stranger, saying I'm not his wife. Talking about some scar I supposedly have, that I've never had, and he won't let me get close to him. I'm coming right now. Keep him calm. Don't let him hurt himself or you. Daryl hung up, and I looked back at Marcus, who was now crying, these silent tears running down his face while he stared at me, with an expression that broke my heart into pieces. I just want my wife back, he whispered. I just want Rochelle. Where is she? Why won't you tell me where she is? I stayed on my side of the bed, keeping my distance because clearly my proximity was making things worse. Marcus, do you remember what we did yesterday? You came home from work around 6. I was already here because I had the early shift. We ordered Thai food from that place on Camelback. You had the pad see ew, and I had the green curry. He frowned, processing this. I remember ordering food, but Rochelle was there, not you. Rochelle was wearing her blue scrubs, and she told me about this patient who tried to smuggle a cat into the cardiac unit. My stomach dropped, because that was exactly what had happened. That was exactly what I'd told him. Wearing my blue scrubs, because that's what I wore to work every single day. That was me, Marcus. I told you that story. I was wearing blue scrubs because that's my uniform. But you don't have the scar, he insisted, coming back to this detail like it was the only thing tethering him to what he believed was true. Rochelle has always had that scar, since before I met her. She showed it to me on our second date and told me about falling off her bike in Detroit where she grew up. Except I grew up in Phoenix. Never lived in Detroit a day in my life. Never fell off a bike hard enough to scar, and this detail he was so certain about had never existed in any version of our reality. Daryl showed up 17 minutes later, letting himself in with the spare key we'd given him years ago, and I met him at the bedroom door where I'd been standing guard to make sure Marcus didn't try to leave or do something that would hurt himself. Daryl was 2 years younger than Marcus, built like he still played college football even though he was now an accountant who spent most of his time behind a desk, and right now he looked terrified in a way I'd never seen on his usually composed face. What's going on? He asked quietly, looking past me to where Marcus sat on the bed, still pressed against the headboard. Exactly what I told you on the phone. He doesn't recognize me, keeps talking about a scar I don't have, thinks I'm some imposter who replaced his real wife. Daryl walked into the room slowly, his hands visible and non-threatening like he was approaching a frightened animal. Marcus. Man, it's me. It's Daryl. You know who I am? Marcus looked at his brother, and something in his face relaxed slightly. Yeah, you're my brother. Thank God you're here. This woman won't tell me where Rochelle is. She keeps pretending to be her, but she's not. She doesn't have the scar. What scar are you talking about? Daryl asked, sitting carefully on the edge of the bed but not getting too close. The one on her shoulder, from when she fell off her bike in Detroit when she was 8. She's always had it. It's part of who she is, and this woman doesn't have it, which means she's not Rochelle. Daryl glanced back at me with an expression that confirmed what I already suspected. Marcus had invented this scar, created this detail that felt more real to him than actual reality. Marcus, I've known Rochelle since you started dating her 10 years ago. I was at your wedding. I've seen her in tank tops and dresses and swimsuits more times than I can count, and I've never seen any scar on her shoulder. I don't think that scar exists, man. No. It exists. I've seen it hundreds of times. I've touched it. I've kissed it. I know my own wife. Marcus's voice was rising now, getting agitated in a way that made me worry about how fast this could escalate. We need to get him to a hospital, I said to Daryl. Something neurological is happening. This level of delusion, combined with the specificity of the false memory, suggests either a psychotic break or something structural in his brain. Daryl nodded and pulled out his phone. I'm calling an ambulance because if we try to drive him ourselves and he gets violent or tries to jump out of the car, we're all in danger. I'm not going anywhere with either of you, Marcus said, his voice sharp. Not until someone tells me what happened to my real wife. The ambulance arrived 12 minutes later, 2 paramedics who'd probably seen everything in their years of working Phoenix nights, and they approached Marcus with the kind of calm professionalism that comes from dealing with psychiatric emergencies regularly. A woman named Angela with kind eyes and steady hands talked to Marcus while her partner, a younger guy named Chris, assessed his vital signs. "Sir, I'm going to check your blood pressure and your heart rate, is that okay?" Chris asked, already wrapping the cuff around Marcus's arm. Marcus let him, seeming less threatened by these strangers than he was by me, and I stood in the corner feeling useless and scared while they worked. Blood pressure's elevated, 150/95, heart rate's 110, pupils are equal and reactive, but I'm seeing some nystagmus when he tracks left. Chris was talking to Angela in that shorthand medical professionals use, and I caught enough of it to understand they were seeing neurological signs that worried them. "Marcus, we'd like to take you to the hospital to run some tests. Make sure everything's working right upstairs," Angela said, tapping her own head gently. "Something's causing you to see things differently than they actually are, and we need to figure out why." "Will Rochelle be at the hospital?" he asked, and my heart cracked open at the hope in his voice. "Will someone tell me where she is if I go?" Angela looked at me, then back at Marcus. "We're going to do everything we can to help you understand what's happening, but you need to come with us now." They got him onto the gurney with surprisingly little resistance, and I followed the ambulance in my car to Banner University Medical Center where I worked, which felt surreal in a way I couldn't fully process. Walking through the emergency department entrance as a patient's family member, instead of as a nurse, made everything look different, the familiar hallways suddenly foreign and threatening. Dr. Patel was the attending on duty, a woman I'd worked with dozens of times, and she recognized me immediately when she came out to take Marcus's history. "Rochelle, I heard it was your husband they brought in. What's going on?" I explained everything while she took notes, the way he'd woken up not recognizing me, the insistence on a scar that didn't exist, the specificity of his false memory about Detroit, and the bike accident. Dr. Patel's expression grew more serious as I talked, and when I finished she was already ordering tests in her head. I could see it in the way her eyes moved. "We're going to do a CT scan first to rule out any acute bleeding or obvious masses, then if that shows anything concerning, we'll move to an MRI for better resolution. His symptoms suggest something affecting his temporal lobe, possibly his fusiform gyrus, which handles facial recognition, combined with memory centers that are creating false recollections that feel real to him." "You think it's a tumor?" I asked, the word tasting like metal in my mouth. "I think it's something structural, and a tumor is definitely on the differential. We'll know more after imaging." They took Marcus back for the CT scan while I sat in the waiting room with Daryl, who'd followed us to the hospital in his own car. Neither of us spoke much, just sat there in the fluorescent lighting surrounded by other people having the worst nights of their lives, waiting for news that would either make sense of this nightmare or make it infinitely worse. Dr. Patel came back 45 minutes later, and I knew from her face before she said anything that the news wasn't good. The CT showed a mass in Marcus's right temporal lobe, approximately 4 centimeters, with some surrounding edema that's causing pressure on adjacent brain structures. "We need to do the MRI to characterize it better, but this is almost certainly what's causing his symptoms." "A brain tumor," I said, because someone needed to say the words out loud. "Yes, and based on the location and the symptoms he's presenting, it's affecting multiple areas of his brain simultaneously. The part that processes faces, the part that stores memories, the part that distinguishes between what's real and what's imagined. From his perspective, the memory of you having a scar is as real as any other memory he has, possibly more real, because the tumor is enhancing that false recollection while disrupting his ability to recognize your actual face." Daryl made a sound next to me, something between a gasp and a sob. "Can you remove it? Can you fix this? We need the MRI results, and then we'll consult with neurosurgery. But yes, depending on the type and location, there's a possibility of surgical intervention. The challenge is that any surgery in the temporal lobe carries risks of permanent memory impairment or changes in personality." The MRI took another 2 hours, and by the time they brought Marcus back to his room in the emergency department, it was nearly 7 in the morning. The sun coming up over Phoenix like any other day, except nothing about this day was normal. Dr. Patel brought in Dr. Kumar, a neurosurgeon who looked too young to be cutting into people's brains, but apparently had trained at Johns Hopkins and knew his business. They pulled up the MRI images on the computer in Marcus's room, and even though I wasn't a radiologist, I could see the mass immediately. This bright, white irregularity sitting in his temporal lobe like an uninvited guest at a dinner party. "This is a meningioma," Dr. Kumar said, using his pen to trace the outline on the screen. "It's a tumor that grows from the membranes covering the brain, usually benign but problematic because of where it's located and how much pressure it's putting on surrounding tissue. In Marcus's case, it's compressing his fusiform gyrus, which handles facial recognition, his hippocampus, which processes memory formation, and his amygdala, which regulates emotional responses. The combination is creating a perfect storm of symptoms that makes him unable to recognize his wife, while simultaneously generating false memories that feel absolutely real to him." Marcus was awake now, watching the screen with an expression I couldn't read. "Is that why I can't find Rochelle? Because of that thing in my brain?" Dr. Kumar turned to face him. "Marcus, the woman who's been here with you all night is Rochelle. She's your wife. But your brain is processing her face incorrectly because of the pressure from this tumor. The scar you remember her having, that's a false memory the tumor has created. It never existed in reality." "But I can see it so clearly," Marcus said, his voice breaking. "I can remember the day she showed it to me. We were at that coffee shop on Mill Avenue. She was wearing a green tank top. She traced the scar with her finger and told me about how much it hurt when she fell. How her grandmother took her to the emergency room and they had to do stitches. I remember all of it. That memory feels real because your brain is creating it with the same neural pathways it uses for actual memories," Dr. Kumar explained. "The tumor is essentially short-circuiting your ability to distinguish between what happened and what your brain is inventing. It's not your fault. It's not a failure of character or sanity. It's a physical problem with a physical solution. Can you take it out?" I asked, my voice steadier than I felt. "Can you remove the tumor and fix what's happening to him?" Dr. Kumar nodded slowly. "We can, but I need to be honest about the risks. Surgery in the temporal lobe always carries the possibility of memory loss, personality changes, or deficits in language and recognition that could be permanent. There's also the standard surgical risks: bleeding, infection, stroke. That said, if we don't remove it, the tumor will continue growing, the symptoms will get worse, and eventually it could cause seizures or more severe cognitive impairment. The benefits outweigh the risks. But I need you both to understand, this isn't without danger." Marcus looked at me then, really looked at me, and for just a second, I thought I saw recognition in his eyes, like maybe some part of his brain was fighting through the interference to remember who I actually was. "If I have the surgery, will I know you again? Will I remember our life together? The goal is to remove the pressure on your brain and restore normal function," Dr. Kumar said carefully. "Most patients see significant improvement in their symptoms after the tumor is removed, but I can't guarantee you'll remember everything exactly as it was before. The brain is remarkably plastic though. It adapts and heals, and with time and possibly some rehabilitation therapy, we expect you to recover most if not all of your cognitive function." I moved closer to the bed, testing whether Marcus would let me approach, and when he didn't flinch away, I took his hand. "Baby, I need you to have this surgery because I need you back, the real you. The you who knows me and loves me and doesn't think I'm some imposter. Whatever happens after, we'll deal with it together, but right now you need to let them fix what's broken." He squeezed my hand and tears started running down his face again. "What if I wake up and still don't know you? What if this is permanent and I never get to see my real wife again?" "Then we'll figure it out. We'll build new memories. I'll show you every photo album and video we've ever made. I'll tell you stories about our life until they stick. But you have to survive this first. You have to let them help you." Dr. Kumar scheduled the surgery for the following morning, giving Marcus a day to stabilize and giving us time to meet with the anesthesiologist and sign approximately 700 consent forms that all basically said things could go wrong and nobody would be legally responsible if they did. Daryl stayed with us, calling Marcus's parents in Houston and his job to explain why he wouldn't be coming to work for a while, handling all the logistics that needed handling while I sat with my husband, who didn't recognize me, and tried to convince him that reality was real. That night, lying in the uncomfortable fold-out chair in Marcus's hospital room, while he slept fitfully under the influence of medications meant to reduce the swelling in his brain, I thought about all the ways our lives had changed in less than 24 hours. Yesterday morning we'd been a normal couple with normal problems. arguing about whose turn it was to take out the trash and whether we could afford to renovate the bathroom. Now we were facing brain surgery, and the very real possibility that Marcus might wake up fundamentally changed. That the man I married might not fully return even if his body recovered. The surgery lasted 6 hours, and I spent every minute of it in the waiting room, with Daryl and Marcus's parents who'd flown in that morning, looking shell-shocked and terrified. Dr. Kumar came out just after 2 in the afternoon, still in his surgical cap, and the relief on his face told me what I needed to know before he said anything. The surgery went well. We removed the entire tumor with clean margins, and Marcus tolerated the procedure without complications. He's in recovery now. We're waiting for him to wake up from anesthesia. Will he know me? I asked, because that was the only question that mattered. We won't know until he's fully awake and we can assess his cognitive function, but I'm optimistic. We relieved a significant amount of pressure on his temporal lobe, and the brain structures underneath appeared healthy. Give it time. They let me see him 2 hours later, and he was awake but groggy, his head wrapped in bandages that made him look vulnerable in a way that made my chest ache. I approached the bed slowly, half expecting him to look at me with that same terrified stranger recognition, but instead he smiled, this small, tired smile that I'd seen 1,000 times before. "Hey, Rochelle," he said, his voice rough from the breathing tube they'd had down his throat during surgery. "Why do you look like you've been crying?" I let out a sound that was half laugh, half sob, and grabbed his hand. "Because you've been an absolute nightmare for the past 36 hours, that's why." "What happened?" "Last thing I remember clearly is ordering Thai food, and then everything gets weird and confusing." Dr. Kumar had warned me this might happen, that Marcus might not remember the episode, that his brain might protect itself by erasing the memories formed while the tumor was affecting his cognition. "You had a brain tumor, they just removed it, you're gonna be fine, but you need to rest and recover." He processed this information, his eyes moving around the hospital room like he was trying to figure out how he'd ended up here. "Did I do anything crazy? Please tell me I didn't do anything too embarrassing." "You thought I was an imposter, and kept asking where your real wife was. Insisted I was missing a scar you'd completely invented, basically acted like you'd never seen me before in your life." He closed his eyes, embarrassed. "I'm so sorry, that must have been terrifying for you." "It was, but you're back now, you know who I am, and that's what matters." The recovery took weeks, physical therapy and occupational therapy, and follow-up appointments with Dr. Kumar, who remained optimistic about Marcus's prognosis. The tumor had been benign, completely removed, and the cognitive symptoms had resolved almost immediately after the pressure was relieved. Marcus had some gaps in his memory from the days surrounding the surgery, but otherwise he was himself again, the man I'd married, the man who knew my face and my voice, and every detail of our shared history. The lawsuit we filed against the delay in diagnosing his symptoms never materialized because there'd been no delay, no malpractice, just a tumor that grew silently until it manifested in the most disturbing way possible. Instead, we focused on being grateful, on rebuilding our sense of security, on accepting that sometimes medical nightmares happen and the best you can hope for is competent doctors and good outcomes. 6 months later, Marcus was back at work and I was back to my regular shifts at the hospital, and life had returned to something approaching normal, except now we both knew how fragile normal really was, how quickly a brain tumor could rewrite reality and make you question everything you thought you knew, and sometimes late at night when I couldn't sleep I'd watch Marcus breathing beside me and feel overwhelmingly grateful that he still knew who I was when he woke up, that the surgery had worked and the tumor was gone and we'd gotten lucky in a situation where luck was never guaranteed, and the legal settlement we'd considered pursuing had transformed into something simpler and more profound.